2025 was a notable year for U.S. beef exports to the Middle East. First, regarding a UAE halal topic that resulted in disruption of U.S. beef imports. And second, it was a year that witnessed record increases in the cost of U.S. beef. And then there's a topic of buying strategies to consider this year. We will explore all three topics in three segments. First, the halal topic. Many of you have been briefed regularly over the past 15 months as a situation developed between EAC, Emirates International Accreditation Center, and the dominant US-based halal certifying body HTO, or Halal Transactions of Omaha. For this report, we will stick with the timeline and the key points. In October 2024, it came to light that EAC had suspended the certification authority of the key U.S. halal organization, HTO. For all intents and purposes, this amounted to a ban on U.S. beef imports. The announcement came as a shock to the trade in the States and throughout the GCC. At the heart of the issue was an unresolved EAC concern that certain aspects of the meatpacking industry's practice of captive bolt stunning might not be compliant with its interpretation of proper halal standards. Stunning had been consistently proven through scientific and academic studies to be safe, humane, and consistent with halal guidelines dating back to the 1980s. However, the science behind the practice is less familiar to halal certifiers, whose primary role is supervision and compliance inside the beef plant. Without direct communication with the beef packer trade and academic authorities, EAC remained unconvinced. The science extended beyond the scope and knowledge of halal certifiers. Now, US One saw the urgent crisis as more of a communication breakdown than a halal problem and worked actively to resolve the underlying reasons for the interruption. The street information available in Dubai and the region often did not match the real cause of the conflict. In the meantime, communication ramped up quickly with halal authorities in the US, interested parties in Dubai, the U.S. Meat Export Federation, and U.S. beef producers on a nearly daily basis for months. By February, some relief was granted, allowing U.S. beef into Dubai on a temporary basis while issues were being worked out. The U.S. beef industry has been involved in halal beef production since the early 80s. Incorporating halal protocols into the U.S. high-volume, modern production plants has been well established and accepted globally for decades. Therefore, the trade's involvement in discussions was important. Failure was not an option. EAC's concerns, if left unresolved, ultimately would have affected all major halal beef producers, including Australia, Brazil, and all countries that employ modern production methods developed for worker safety and animal well-being. There was an emerging belief in the States that improved communication and cooperation between the concerned parties and strong advisory involvement of the U.S. trade was key to a lasting solution. In the spring of 2025, US One proposed an official halal subcommittee within the U.S. Meat Export Federation. The intent was to bring the highest level of industry and academic expertise to the table to assist the parties to find a resolution. This new working group provided an informal bridge between U.S. beef trade, U.S. halal certifiers, and international certifying bodies such as EAC. This was the missing piece. Finally, the U.S. beef trade had a voice in matters that involved its role in making the processes work while bringing its deep technical know-how to the conversation. By October 2025, all issues were resolved to all parties' satisfaction. The USMEF's Working Halal Group success had solidified its technical role in helping to address and resolve halal-related issues at the packer level. Its contribution has resulted in a return to stability and confidence that working together, business can grow with less fear of sudden, unexpected trade disruptions. Let's talk about the surging U.S. beef prices in 2025. What has been behind it? Who is guilty? Many in the mainstream media have focused on the effects of drought on producers who have been liquidating herds over the past several years to control costs of feeding. The real picture is not that simple. First, we are at the very end of a 30-month cattle cycle when herds are liquidated and then must be rebuilt, and there just are fewer cows available to replenish stocks. For chickens, that's about 6 weeks. Beef cattle, 2.5 years. Cattle numbers are at their lowest point in over 50 years. That very well understood cycle is about to reverse, as the current rebuilding phase will result in more cattle ready for market later this year. This will help take pressure off prices. While the U.S. continues to rank as the biggest producer of beef globally, the U.S. cattle herd has been in a very slow decline for decades. This decline has been mostly offset with the industry raising bigger animals. Most years, the U.S. produces more beef than the year before as the weight of cattle has continued to grow. It's simple ag economics. It's profitable to raise bigger cattle. Witness the size of your typical U.S. ribeye steak over the past 10 years, 20 years, 30 or 40 years. An 8-ounce ribeye portion in 1980 has become a 14 to 16-ounce steak today. They just keep getting bigger. But there's more. More than 1 million head of feeder cattle so far have not been allowed into the states from Mexico in 2025 due to the appearance of screwworm in Mexico. This outbreak has been very closely monitored to ensure the disease does not spread into the U.S. The loss of the 1 million plus head of cattle that normally come into the U.S. for feeding and fattening and harvest has made a cattle shortage situation much worse. We hope to see a lifting of those restrictions in 2026. Public policy has also played a role as well in 2025 with tariffs and the uncertainty of the short term and long term impact of government actions complicating the situation. And then there is the issue of beef production capacity. Low cattle inventory caused the closure of one major plant just this month in January of 2026, while another mega plant is cut back to a single shift from 2 shifts. These are plants with daily production of close to 5,000 head per day. Modern American beef mega plants must run very close to capacity for packers to be profitable. Now, one would think that all of this doom and gloom talk would have killed demand for U.S. beef, and yet high demand remains despite double-digit price increases. This continued high demand for U.S. beef has played a role in keeping prices elevated. So, how is that possible? Now, part of the answer lies in the reduced supply of ready to market cattle, with demand being great enough to offset lower production numbers. But that's not the whole story. Beef, particularly very high quality beef, remains extremely popular, and U.S. beef grading is at an all time high. More on that later in the next segment. In summary, the surge in U.S. beef prices in 2025 resulted from a convergence of factors. Drought has contributed to some herd liquidation. That's one factor. Long cattle production cycles, limited beef and beef supply. Border closures due to screwworm outbreak in Mexico put added pressure on supply of cattle. Trade policies, including high tariffs, caused business uncertainty within the entire cattle and beef supply chain. There have been major plant closures and then continued strong consumer demand. Collectively, these converging factors created a tight cattle supply and upward pressure on prices in 2025. So, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? U.S. cattle numbers will reach the lowest point in mid 2026 before the rebuilding phase kicks in. However, peak prices might have already happened in 2025. Historically, beef prices peak about a half year before the inventory of cattle drops to the lowest level. We will soon see if that pattern holds true this cycle as we get into the summer months of 2026. Let's talk buying strategies in 2026. We have lived through many of these cycles over the years. With each multi year cycle, patterns do emerge. And what have we learned over the past few decades? Well, first, when prices surge, don't quit. But it is advised to reduce inventory levels. Those importers who continue to maintain some inventory during price cycle surges benefit greatly. Lower inventory means lower storage and carrying costs. With longer transit times by sea, almost double what they were a couple years ago, air freight can be an effective short term solution. But isn't air freight expensive? Well, relatively, maybe not. Air freight inventories turn faster, require less refrigerated warehouse space, and keep inventory and storage costs low compared to ocean shipments. The extra few percentage points for air are offset by those lower costs, and the ability to turn those sales 3 or 4 times faster than by sea. Well, it just makes sense. In other words, for every time an importer can purchase, sell, and collect for a sea shipment, air transport allows importers to purchase, sell, and collect on air multiple times. The strategy actually works. It is a smart use of limited funds, while most competitors will sit it out or rely on local purchases from those who elect to keep inventories on hand. Your USB partner will be able to advise you the best course of action because tactics can often change week to week. Second, do not become too dependent on a single packer, especially during lean times. A unique aspect of U.S. beef is its standardized government grading program. U.S. beef is government graded according to measurable objective criteria. All plants operate under the same government grading system, so the quality of a choice strip loin in one plant will be graded by the same criteria as beef produced in all other USDA inspected plants. Therefore, it benefits buyers not to be overly reliant on any one packer. Be flexible. Take time to understand the uniqueness of the U.S. system and then make the U.S. system work for you. For chain operators during times of reduced supply and higher costs, follow your franchise specs and do not cut quality for short term gain. Customers are smart, they figure it out quickly. We can tell many stories of the rise and fall of chain operators who failed in large part to compromising on quality. Use your chain's leverage in negotiating the best deals for its operators and make certain that your U.S. supply partners use their best efforts to tap into U.S. chain domestic contracts. This can really help keep costs as low as possible. These contracts are highly leveraged for their operators, not just domestic operators, but international partners as well. So, where is the good news in all of this? Well, first, we are near the end of the current cattle cycle, when the rebuilding phase will result in more marketable cattle. It's a cycle. The sky is not falling. It's just a normal production cycle that's playing itself out. The market works. And perhaps most important, U.S. beef grading is at an all time high level. The overall quality of the U.S. beef herd keeps getting better. It's been a very real trend over the past several years as ranchers have adapted science based approaches to breeding and raising cattle. The top grade of U.S. beef, USDA Prime, has grown from an average of 3% of production over several decades to as high as 20% of production some weeks in 2025. We expect the prime grade category to continue to grow. It's where the action is, and it is where we see the best opportunities for growth and success. Now, many times during the year, the production of USDA Prime exceeds that of the base level USDA Select grade, something impossible to imagine just a few years ago. Very often, USDA Prime outperforms most of the beef being marketed as Wagyu bred beef for a lower cost, and there's plenty of Prime to go around. So there is a silver lining to the U.S. beef story as we move into the new year. With plentiful supplies of truly exceptional quality beef at excellent comparative values. And while no one has a magic ball to predict the future, history tells us that we will see seasonal relief. That, in fact, has already started. Beyond that, we should see more stable pricing overall as cattle inventories start to grow in the second half of 2026. If you have any questions or comments about anything beef related, just let us know. And thanks for tuning in. Life is good. Happy trails.